to thank SY Mistress faithful patrons, and to those new ones recently, thank you very much, patrons. I want to put a shelf in here for obvious reasons. Okay, well here we are. Just use your imagination, folks. Well, the first look of the oven in. Like I did with that single berth, I'm going to cut a nice radius, so there's a bit involved with this shelf for the galley, and then I can get on and start making this end panel. So here's the next little situation to solve. Well, just before I make a start on the nav area, on the list is to get this shelf in here and this little end panel for where the stove will sit. But I just wanted to address a couple of housework things. The first is, I did have a note on a video a couple of weeks ago about Paul S, who was very kind with his paypal.me donation. I replied to your email to thank you, but it bounced, so it seems like the address was not quite right. Just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you very, very much for that. And to everybody who has sent a bit of support through paypal.me, really, really appreciated. And it's nice to take the opportunity to thank SY Mistress faithful patrons, and to those new ones recently, thank you very much, patrons. Your support is fantastic. And the other thing to mention is Morgan commented on the diesel tank video suggesting that I use rivet nuts. I wish I'd have known before about them, to be honest, because that really would have been an ideal solution for those stiffeners to secure the diesel tank. Just to point out, Morgan, thanks very much, but also to everybody who comments and makes great suggestions like that. I just wish that I would have known about that a little earlier. So please feel free to leave comments and make suggestions. I read every comment, and as most people know, I respond, and I'm learning a lot as I'm going along this process, especially when it's newer stuff that I just haven't come into contact with. So once again, thank you guys for commenting, making suggestions, and sharing your knowledge. So as I mentioned previously, I want to put a shelf in here for obvious reasons, and thankfully I did make a couple of marks. I did make a couple of marks when these were being made that show the position of that shelf. So there's the line there, and it runs into this other bulkhead, so I'll just measure that up, and as usual make a template for this, as well as this end panel that goes here to close off the end of that cupboard space, and also it will be the partition to separate off the oven. I might be improving. That is first time, first fit. Well, that end panel has gone in nicely. As probably looks obvious, this is the space for the cooker oven. Because of that, and because this is only 12mm marine plywood, what I want to do is put a bit of rosewood as a backing plate for the mounting bolts for the oven. I'll make that reasonably large in the event that in the future I change the oven and the models don't have exactly the same fitting brackets. So I'm trying to take that sort of thing into account. In other words, there's a little bit more to this panel, and then that can be sanded and epoxied when some other bits of timber and plywood are ready for the epoxy coating. And as you can see, I actually ended up having to put a little filler piece on top there. Don't ask me. But it was 35mm short at that end, and so what I did was I've put a mitre cut on both and joined that with a mitre cut with epoxy. Well, the first look of the oven in. Hopefully the camera's far enough away so you don't see it full of dust, It's been sitting in storage for a long time. It's not exactly a large oven. I guess you'd call it a medium size. But as you can see, I've left this space large enough so that should I decide ahead to fit a larger one, I can. I feel quite sure that this will do me for who knows how many years in the future. But at the least, it is a proper oven. Couple of nice large burners on top. So as I mentioned, what I'm doing here is I want to work out where these brackets are going to go to have the stove gimbaled and put a backing plate of rosewood on that inside. I'll then need to get some custom hinges made up to gimbal it on, which is fine, and I'll make those out of 316 stainless steel. But it is really nice to see this in. Okay, well here we are. Just use your imagination, folks. Navigation area. I'm excited. Now that I've finished those two panels for the galley, I can actually get on with designing and making this. The rough idea is a seat underneath me here, and then the desk here, and there'll be a second skin, as I mentioned before. I don't need anything fancy, but at the same time, obviously I want it to look nice, and I think that this end panel and the top will be the main things. Other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward really. So I'll spend a bit of time thinking about this end panel here and the top and heights and get on with designing it. Well, that's those next panels and beams for that galley end panel shelf and seat for the navigation area. Pleased with the way this is coming up. Even little pieces like that is part of the puzzle. It'll all make sense when you see it. Just to point out with this navigation seat, a couple of beams here. One will go against that bulkhead separating the navigation area from cabin 3, and I've just put a little 40-degree angle on the end of that just so that in the event that you see the end of that beam, it'll just be softer on the eye. And then with this front beam, what I'm going to do, like I did with that single berth, I'm going to cut a nice radius to follow the curve of the seat, and you'll see the end of that beam, that lovely rosewood with its lovely grain. And so should your eye catch that, that'll be a nice soft curve on your eye as well. And as you can see also, I just cut a few ventilation holes in that seat. And so apart from the epoxy hardening, with those couple of little bits added onto that end panel, they're all ready to have the edges trimmed and then epoxy coated. El son de Cuba. So there's a bit involved with this shelf for the galley. What you can see here are the shelf supports, which I'll be fixing to the galley and lining panels. And then also I've just made this beam here, which I'll fix along the center line to stiffen that panel. And that's really for the over time aspect, because I can imagine over time with getting heavy things put into that shelf, it's likely to bow. So I've made up this beam, which I'll fix to the bottom, and that'll just mean that that shelf will stay put over time. Okay, now it's for the next stage here in the nav area, and so there's still quite a few things to do here for the next moves. One of which is obviously the lining panels. I will be adding that polyurethane foam insulation behind that, so that needs to be put in as well. Also, I've been mulling over for a few days about just how I'm going to do this floor area. It's not quite as simple. Like everything with boats, as it might seem. The reason being the shape of the hull right here in this area. And so I've come up with a plan which I think is going to work well. So I need to make the floor piece, and then I can get on and start making this end panel. And that's the one I'm really looking forward to seeing come together.
El son de Cuba traigo yo, apúrense que el son llegó. El son de Cuba, el son de Cuba traigo yo, porque la fiesta ya empezó. La fiesta sigue toda la noche con este ritmo tan especial. La gente baila, la gente goza con esa música original. El son de Cuba, el son de Cuba traigo yo.
So here's the next little situation to solve. I was aware that getting some sort of floor for the nav area was going to mean solving this problem with the cabin sole panel, because I want to keep that panel in one piece, and also because that panel really shouldn't really have reason over time that it would need to be removed regularly or now and again. The storage space underneath is very small. It's really not worthwhile trying to make that a storage space. And so the only real reason to remove that cabin sole panel ahead would be if there was some sort of damage to the hull, or maybe something got lost under there, I'm not sure. I can't really think of good reasons to move that panel, certainly not regularly. But of course, that's what you have to think about with the boat, is in the event. So here I am. I'm advancing with this nav area nicely, and I've got this floor template in now and it's looking good. But I just want to make sure that I can put this cabin sole panel in and pull it out once that floor panel is in place.
Apúrense que el son llegó, el son de Cuba, el son de Cuba traigo yo, porque la fiesta ya empezó, ya empezamos a fiestar, mamita, ven, ven y juntos vamos a bailar. La fiesta sigue toda la noche, ven, ven y juntos vamos a gozar. Que yo le traigo mi son son, anda, sí es la verdad, que yo le traigo mi son son, sabroso. Que yo le traigo mi son son, 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 yo le traigo mi son, que yo le traigo mi son son, ay, mi son para bailar, mi son para gozar, que yo le traigo mi son son, sí, yo te traigo.
Well, this is the first look of the nav desk. Preliminary ideas, cut out a template here, and I think I'm in the ballpark. It may get some fine tuning, but all in all, this is the sort of space that I'm going to be having for the nav area. So obviously the seat won't move. It won't have a handle here either, which will make getting in and out easy. But the bulkhead behind, which separates cabin 3 and the nav area, is basically where the back of this chair is. So in other words, especially with the cushions on, it's a space that you'd be able to sit back, stretch your feet out in front. If you have a computer there, or if you're wanting to just sit down and look at some weather charts or even a movie or any sort of streaming, you could sit down, stretch your legs out, relax, and have plenty of space, which is what I wanted. And then of course, if you were wanting to get down to the nitty-gritty of looking at a chart and plotting some positions, you just move forward on the seat, and then you can have your hands on top of the chart, you can reach instruments, have your chart out, use your dividers, and away you go. As you can see, there is an incline on the table, traditional navigation chart style, and yes, it will have an opening lid to be able to store charts, pencils, and navigation tools. I'm sure people are going to say it's not big enough for a full-size chart. No, it's not. But in order to have a navigation desk big enough for a full-size chart, really you're looking at about 1.2 meters by about 0.8 of a meter. And that space I do not have here. However, the largest of charts, and there are differences in sizes in the different charts produced around the world. For the largest one, when folded in half, it will fit into this space, which will be approximately half a metre by 0.7 of a metre. So all things considered, I think that this is not bad. I'll now take it into Mistress and give it a try and see what it looks like. So there you have it, people, making good progress in the nav desk area. In the next episode, please like, subscribe, hit that bell and share. I'd really appreciate that.